Hello, welcome to Cognitum, a show dedicated to the present and future of science and technology. I'm your host, Iosef Gershteyn. Joining us tonight is Ellen Langer, widely dubbed the Mother of Mindfulness. She is a professor of psychology at Harvard University, the first woman ever to be tenured to that department. She holds 3 Distinguished Scientist Awards, a Guggenheim Fellowship, and is the winner of the Liberty Science Genius Award. Her most recent book is The Mindful Body, Thinking Our Way to Chronic Health. Ellen, welcome.
Thank you so much.
So your work focuses in on mindfulness. Could you tell me what is mindfulness?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, because oftentimes I do these interviews and we throw the word around and people don't really know what it is I'm talking about. When you say mindfulness, people tend to think of meditation. And meditation is fine, but meditation isn't mindfulness. Meditation is a practice you engage in to result in post-meditative mindfulness. Mindfulness, as we study it, is more immediate. It's not a practice. And it's so simple, Joseph, that it almost defies belief when we talk about the consequences. All you need to do is notice new things. Now, you don't notice new things because you think you know. And we don't know, we can't know, because everything is always changing. Everything looks different from different perspectives. So the best way to become mindful is to accept that you don't know, and then everything is new. Or, as we typically study it, we have people noticing new things about the things they think they know. And then you see, gee, I didn't know it as well as I thought I did, and your attention naturally goes to it. To make it real for people, because they think, well, what is she talking about? The one thing that everybody thinks they know is how much 1 and 1 is. So how much is 1 and 1?
2.
That's right, that's what people think, but it's only sometimes true. If you add 1 cloud plus 1 cloud, 1 plus 1 is 1. You add 1 pile of laundry plus 1 pile of laundry, 1 plus 1 is 1. You add 1 watt of chewing gum plus 1 watt of chewing gum, 1 plus 1 is 1. So in the real world, 1 plus 1 probably doesn't equal 2, as or more often as it does. So now let's say we finish our interview, and this is very unlikely, I know, but as you walk out of a studio, someone says to you, how much is 1 plus 1? You're not going to just mindlessly say 2. You're going to pay some attention to the context, and then you'll say, it could be 2. Or you could even say it could be 1 if you want to have a longer conversation with the person, right? So after 45 years of research on this, we find that virtually all of us are mindless almost all the time. We're not there. Now, the thing is that when you're not there to know you're not there, right? So you can correct it by simply saying, I'm going to be present. But there are ways, too, that I've just told you, of correcting it. So it's a very simple process of noticing the neurons are firing, and we find that it's figuratively and literally enlivening. We have several studies where we take elderly people, we make them more mindful in this active noticing way, and they live longer. We have studies showing that in some way you really do light up. People can sense, and there's something very attractive about you when you're being mindful. So we have research showing people see you as more authentic, they see you as charismatic. Your relationships improve for reasons hopefully we'll be able to go into. Your health improves. It even leaves its imprint on the activities you engage in. So for example, we did a study a while ago where we had orchestras that we were going to encourage to be mindful and telling them, play it the way you've always played it, make it new in very subtle ways, versus remember a performance, all playing the same music that you really liked, and just replicate it. And we record it, and then we play it for people who know nothing about the study, and overwhelmingly they prefer the mindfully played piece, the mindfully played piece. But just so think about it. When you're mindful, you're alive, people like you more, it leaves its imprint in what you do, it's better for your memory, your relationships, and most importantly at this moment for me right now is your health. What people don't understand is that the act of noticing is what you do when you're engaged in something. And so it's only good, and it's energy begetting. You feel better. So if you could feel uplifted, engaged, passionate all day long, versus walking around like a robot, I think that the choice is a no-brainer, as is said. So essentially, that's what mindfulness is, just active noticing.
How do you integrate that into your own life?
It's interesting because people often ask me, which of my studies has changed my life most, meaning where did I learn something? And for me, it really works in the opposite way, that I think of something that to me I take as surely the case, and then I notice other people don't do it or agree with it. Then I put it into a study. So at the end, it's something that way I've been living my life. As a little kid, I remember I was very, very fortunate. I had parents that were enormously supportive and loving, right? And so coming from that, I'm interacting with people and they're complaining. I said, well, why don't you look at it this way? So I have a whole lifetime of looking at things from multiple perspectives, and that's really the essence of being mindful.
So you were always mindful, or was there a particular story that, or a particular
Um,
moment that put
no,
you on this path?
I was probably in some ways more mindful than many people, but certainly not always. I mean, I would walk into a mannequin and say, "Excuse me." I still have when I'm talking on the phone and it's to a machine, I make sure I say please, thank you, and whatever, which I wouldn't do if I were aware at the moment that the machine doesn't care how polite I am towards them. Um, but I do think that um, part of the experience I had growing up might have facilitated my being more mindful than many, which was, again, immodestly said, but it's the only way to tell the story. When I was a child, I was athletic and popular, but I was also a nerd. And so what that meant was that I had nerdy friends and I had the popular friends. And what happened more often than on just on a one or two occasions is one group would believe strongly in X and the other group would believe strongly in not X. And, so there I am getting both perspectives, which said to me, well, sometimes it's X, sometimes it's not X. It's hard to know when you're looking back whether you're just putting on your memories all that's happening at the moment or whether you actually had those experiences. But one thing that was very, very important to me happened when I was already an adult, but a young adult. I was at this horse event, and this man asked me if I'd watch his horse for him because he was going to get his horse a hot dog. Well, I was Harvard and Yale. I am Harvard and Yale all the way through, straight A student. No one knows better, as well, but not better than I. Horses don't eat meat. Okay. And it's all I can do, but, not to make him feel silly. He came back with the hot dog, and the horse ate it. It was amazing. My whole world changed. And I asked, how did they know horses don't eat meat? How many horses were tested? How big were the horses? How much meat was mixed with how much grain? So on and so forth. And that led me to think about studies, because science, where people get many of their, quote, absolute facts, like horses don't eat meat, or 1 and 1 is 2, um, come from experiments, and experiments only give us probabilities. Experiments say that if you were to run the exact same study, you could never run exactly the same study. You're a few hours at least older. But if you were to run the exact same study, you're likely to get these results. So those probabilities become absolutes. So not under the circumstances in which we tested them, most horses didn't eat the meat. It's said horses don't eat meat. And that's the way we learn everything. That's the way parents teach their children. That's the way we're taught in school. Absolutes. And so at that moment, when that horse ate that hot dog, all of these facts I knew became possibly wrong. And rather than worry about that, I loved it because it opened up a world of possibility to me. And I also liked the idea that I, as a straight A student, now may be more often wrong than the B or C student or D student. I liked the leveling aspect of it. So, yeah, that was very important. That said, that anything you think might be true, anything you want to test, you can't know that it can't be true. We can never show that somebody can't with experiments. All you can prove is that what they tried didn't work under the circumstances in which it was tested. So it opened up possibility, and that's been sort of the hallmark of all of my research. Rather than trying to describe what is, much of my work is designed to see, well, what can be? How far can we push things? And this gave me license to continue in that direction.
What are some things that you were surprised to learn that you can do or are possibilities?
Well, again, you see, I don't do the experiment and then learn, this is possible. I have a reason to believe that it's likely to be true. Then I do the study to test it and, then find out, indeed, it was true. I think, years and years ago, I guess I was, how old? I don't know, my early 30s. And I was at this big, important Academy of Sciences, American Academy of Sciences, no, National Academy of Sciences meeting. And they were talking about the problem that's going to exist in 2020, all right, because there are going to be so many old people. And these were all people in their 50s, 60s, and there I was, much younger. And they were talking about all the problems old people have. And I thought, well, wait a second. I mean, this is bizarre. Why I think that old people can be just fine, and all of these people are resigned to only decrements describing old age. And then I realized that my grandmother, I think that what our first inclination is as to what old is, are our grandparents. Now, my grandparents, my grandmother, I didn't know my grandfathers, my mother's mother was very young, all right, but she was still a grandmother. So given that she was kind of young, to me, the notion of old was basically full of life. And so we did some research to test that. And yes, if your earliest experiences of old are terrible, that's what the way you age yourself.
And if your earliest experiences of old are positive, so if you have young grandparents, you have a better trajectory of aging?
I think so, yes. And when Becca Levy was my graduate student, we did some research on this, and she's continued it, wonderful research, that your attitudes about old age, when they're formed, when you're much younger, predict how old you're going to be. And if you have positive attitudes, you're going to live maybe 8 years longer. I teach this to my Harvard students in a health class, and I tell them the reason we're talking about old age, which none of you really care about, is because the views you hold now will affect your own aging. Even the idea of aging interests me, and I wrote about this many years ago. Who decided, when you're young, you're developing, and then all of a sudden, you're aging, and so a lot of my work has been about growth in late adulthood.
Late adulthood starting?
It depends on how old I am as to when it starts. I think that most people believe that you grow until you're about 40, and then problems set in. And if you believe that, that's what will happen.
So you think expectations
are the whole game, the whole ball game, as illustrated in some of our mind-body unity studies. Would you like me to tell you about those?
Yes, I would.
Okay. So and people need to understand, when I'm talking about mind-body unity, I'm not talking about mind-body connection. Okay, so let's go back a long time ago. People believed you had a mind, you had a body. They were separate. And the medical world actually believed that the only way you were going to get sick was the introduction of an antigen. All right, that it's nice to be happy, but or not to be stressed, what have you, but that wasn't going to have an important effect on your health. All right. Then things changed, and the people started to believe that, of course, mind and body are connected. The problem with that is you've got to figure out how to get from this fuzzy thing called a thought to something material called the body. And the fact of that problem, I think, held up research for quite some time. So I say mind, body, these are really just words. could have had mind, body, and elbows, then we'd have a very different conception of people. Let's put the mind and body back together. And if we do that, if it's one unit, then wherever you put the mind, you're necessarily putting the body. So we did a host of studies over many years now where we put the mind in strange places, sometimes strange places, and then take the measurements from the body. The earliest one of these is called the counterclockwise study. Now, I was informed that this is a famous study, which I understand now, because if you tune into The Simpsons Go to Havana, it's described in that episode. Okay, but essentially all we did was take old men and we had them live in a retreat that had been retrofitted to 20 years earlier, right? They were going to live in it as if they were their younger selves. That meant they were talking about things in the past in the present tense. They'd be watching movies in television shows from the past. All the magazines, everything there said this was 20 years earlier, right? As a result of this very brief time, 5 days, I think it was 5 days, without medical intervention, we found their vision improved, their hearing improved, their strength improved, their memory, and they looked noticeably younger, just by changing their minds. Now, some people say you can't turn time back. You turn the clock. You can easily turn it. We do it every year, right? What is it? Fall back. We change the clocks. But what the study is about is that my deep belief that we're all capable of far more than we think that we are, and that much of the loss that we experience is a function of our expectations. So by taking people, priming their younger selves, we bypass them asking themselves questions, can they do this or that, and get them just to do it. And so we have many, many studies, and too many for me to go over all of them. It's just part of what I want to talk to you about today, which is about the mindful body, the book. But let me give you an example of two others. Okay, one was a study we did right after this. This one is kind of amazing. The first one is amazing, even though I'm now contradicting everything I said before. I had belief that it would work. That's why I used the measures, and it worked. I was, wow, it worked. Okay, but so for the chambermaid study, we take these chambermaids. The first thing we do is ask them, how much exercise do you get? These women are exercising all day long, but they don't think that they're exercising because the Surgeon General says exercise is what you do after work. Because if you sit at a desk all day, that's when you exercise, either before or after work. After work, they're just too tired. Very simple study. We divide the chambermaids into two groups. One of the groups, we tell them, your work is exercise. Making a bed is like working on this machine at the gym and so on. Okay. Now, these women are the same to start, two groups. We take lots of measures. At the end of the study, we find that they're not eating any differently from each other. They're not exercising any more or less or more exertion. Nevertheless, the group that now sees that their work is exercise, just changing their mind, resulted in loss of weight, a change in waist to hip ratio, body mass index, and their blood pressure came down just by changing their mind. Just as the old people, just changing their mind resulted in vision and hearing improving. One of the most recent studies was about wound healing. So we inflict a wound, a minor, very minor wound, because we don't want to hurt people, and they're in front of a clock. Unbeknownst to them, the clock is rigged. So for a third of the people, the clock is going twice as fast as real time. For a third of the people, the clock is going half as fast as real time. For a third of the people, it's real time. The question we're asking, is that wound going to heal based on however long it takes to heal, right? Real time. Or is it going to heal based on perceived time? And it turned out it was perceived time. We have studies with diabetes, where, again, blood sugar level relates to perceived amount of time passed. We have people wake up in a sleep lab, And I'm big on clocks. I don't know how this happened, but we fix the clock so when you wake up, you see, gee, I got 2 hours more sleep than I actually did. You don't know that, or you're thinking you got 2 hours fewer, or the amount of sleep you got, and your belief about how much sleep you got resulted in your response biologically and psychologically. So lots of studies. One that I find really interesting is our notions of fatigue, because people think, certainly that's wired in. At some point, you're just going to get tired. So the simplest thing we did to start was to say to people, I want you to do 100 jumping jacks and tell me when you're tired. Very simple. So they do them, and they get tired around 70. Take a different group of people, and we say, I want you to do 100 and I want you to do 200 jumping jacks and tell me when you get tired. They get tired at 140. Right. 2/3 of the way through an activity is when most people get tired. Right. So what does that mean? That means that whatever you're doing, you can do a lot more. And let me tell you two things. I'm going to ask you to remind me of this. Okay. I'm going to talk to you about how far we can run. But first, I want to tell you about a study that Frank Beach did. This was in the 50s. So what he did was he took a little boy rat, several of them. He starts one little boy rat, introduces a little girl rat. So they copulate, and then the little boy rat, all right, I had enough. He needs a refractory period. Good. And that's every little boy rat introduced to a little girl rat. Now, what he does is introduce a brand new little girl rat. And right away, he's ready to go again. He doesn't need the refractory period. The point is you change the context and all of a sudden you have renewed energy. Make it easier for people to understand. You're word processing all day long and you're so achy and you just can't bear it. And then you go home and you play the piano, right? So we have a lot of control over our experience of fatigue. You change the context, you get renewed energy. All right, so I asked my class, and this is a Harvard class, so kids are very smart. And I said, how far is it humanly possible to run? Okay, they know a marathon is 26 miles. They know that I wouldn't ask the question if the answer was 26, 27, whatever. So it's like an auction. They start, somebody says 30, somebody else 35, and they'll only go as far as 50.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Then I play them this YouTube about the Tarahumara, the tribe in Copper Canyon in Mexico, where these people can run over 200 miles without stopping. The difference between 50, and most of them didn't believe 50, right? They thought around 30, and over 200 is enormous. And that's what I'm suggesting is true for all of us, for almost everything. There is so much more than we can do, achieve, be, with respect to just being happy, being healthy, accomplishing whatever we want to accomplish. And that's why I keep writing these books and hoping that people will read them and then get the message out there.
I think most people want to be happier and healthier.
Oh, sure they do, but they don't believe it they can be. There are some people who believe that, I've got this dread diagnosis and it's just a matter of time. Gee, I wish I didn't have this cancer. I wish I didn't have a stroke, Parkinson's, whatever it is, but they've been taught that when you're given these, but when people are diagnosed with chronic illnesses, that you don't recover. What you do with some of them is you're able to hold it steady, but reversals are not part of the what medical people presume to be true.
So how do you generate this belief? How do you create chronic health?
Okay, well, one simple way is to look around at all the people who were told you have 6 months to live. This is a funny story. When my mother had breast cancer and she's in the hospital, this woman who she didn't know wandered in. She saw that her name was Sylvia. She said, Sylvia, I have to tell you that 2 years ago, they told me I had 6 months to live. I spent all of my money, and I'm still alive now, but I'm poor. Okay, and we've all heard stories, so it's a matter of recognizing that there's a great deal of truth in it. And I think what people need to understand, none of us know how long we have. And people seem intent on adding more years to their lives, when I think the key is to add more life to your years. And that probably will lead to longer life as well. So if you get a diagnosis that's scary, also that when the medical world says there's no cure for it, all that means is that they don't know a cure for it. But there are always things we can do. An example, I guess this isn't a great example, but I'll tell you anyway. If you imagine an Olympic runner, woman, Olympic athlete, and we have a couch potato, and all she's doing is watching television all day long and eating too much and what have you. If both of them were exposed, this, I don't have data on this, it's a thought experiment, but if both of them were exposed to COVID, and let's say both of them got COVID, I don't think their experience of it would be the same. So the hidden message in that is that whatever ails us, we can always do more to strengthen the rest of us, the rest of the body. And I think that being mindful, as I said before, and studies we've done with elderly people, by being more mindful, they live longer and they're happier. And so that's something else that people can do. Most important is for people to understand that any of these dread diagnoses are derived from experiments. And as I said before, experiments don't give us absolutes. Experiments give us probabilities. So instead of you have cancer, you probably have cancer. If you probably have cancer, it will go in this way. Should be changed to it may go in this way, which also means it may not. And the medical world, I think, needs to make that clear to people. They need to make clear the limits to what they know. And I think that when you recognize those limits, what we should be doing at most is partnering with the medical world with respect to our health care, rather than just turning ourselves over to them.
What do you think the role of entertainment and information plays?
Oh, well, I think, that if you're entertained, the only way you can be entertained is if you're mindful. Jokes, almost by definition, make you mindful. You start off and you're going in this direction, and then you get the punchline. Takes you over here, something brand new. That's mindful. So whenever you're enjoying yourself, you're being mindful. And that mindfulness is good for not just making us feel better, but for our health itself. So I'm very much in favor of being entertained. In fact, I think that, well, I don't want to be boastful, but, and maybe it's not boasting, maybe people think I'm ridiculous, but I make almost everything a game. It's just fun. I'm reminded that it was graduation, and I'm sitting on the stage with people in my department, and we don't realize what we've set ourselves up for. They're going to give degrees now, individual degrees, to all of the different departments, okay, in arts and sciences. A lot of departments. What are we going to do? Because I don't really care about East Asian studies, who's getting that. I don't know these people. Okay, so I make it a little game, and I say, okay, because we don't know how many people are in each of these departments. So they call that, let's say for argument's sake, East Asian Studies, and I say 6. And so, no, 3. And we do, and then time passed quickly, and it was fun, and we actually learned something. I think we have too many mindless notions. We have things like work and play as different categories, which almost suggests that you shouldn't be enjoying yourself at work. And I think you should play seriously, and you should work playfully. Even people who try to get past that, who say things like, you want work-life balance. Sounds nice. It's certainly better than work-life imbalance, but there's a better way, which would be work-life integration. You want to be the same person, whether you're at work or at play, And the way to do that is, as I've said, to make what you're doing fun, or interesting at least, and so you're not a different person in the two places. I think people accept things that I think I would never accept, and I would like to caution people. They say that stress is natural. Everybody is stressed. I'm not stressed. I don't think everybody is stressed. And certainly everybody isn't equally stressed. And, if you approach your work in this stressful way, stress, I think, is the major killer. I think if you took all disease and we were able to get people, let's take cancer. Now, I don't think that anybody would say, oh, I've got cancer. I mean, clearly, if you're given a diagnosis like that, you're going to worry. But let's say we let 3 weeks pass where people figure out how they're going to cope with it. And after that, we measure how stressed they are every 3 or 4 weeks. I think that level of stress will predict the course of the disease over and above treatment, genetics, nutrition, and everything else. Now think about it, because stress is a psychological concept, all right? Stress is the belief that something is going to happen, and when it does, it's going to be awful. We can't predict what's going to happen. Now people find that one hard also. But going forward, I mean, just ask yourself, wherever you are right now, what's going to happen, in an hour? Who'll call you? Will anybody call you? Will somebody tell you that they just slipped or they just fell in love? Or, we can't predict. An example I use, probably overused. If I use an example 2, 3 times, all of a sudden it becomes real to me. But I don't know if this clarifies anything. But imagine you're at a party and you see Tom and Susie fighting. If I said to you right at that moment, do you predict they're going to get a divorce? You'd probably say, well, people fight. I have no idea. But let's say I didn't ask you that. And 2 weeks later, you find out Tom and Susie are getting a divorce. Ah, I knew it. You should have seen them go at each other at the party. Okay, so we're so good at post-dicting, we think we can predict. And it's an illusion. I said to my students in a graduate decision-making class, what is the likelihood I'm going to be here next week for class? I have never missed a class. I've taught this for 40 years, aversion. And so we go around the room. Again, these are Harvard students, so they're not going to say 100%. They say silly things. 97%. How are they going to calculate that? So essentially, all 12 people in a small seminar all say, I'm going to be there for sure. Now I say to them, all right, I want each of you to give me a good reason why I won't be here next week. The first one, oh, it's amazing. First one always says, you've always been here, you deserve the time off. The next person says, your dog has to go to the vet. The next person said, you got a flat tire. So we get 12 reasons. Now I say, okay, what is the likelihood? Predict. Am I going to be here next week or not? And now the 100% drops to 50%. As who knows? Right? Now, when you know you don't know, that could be scary unless you realize that nobody knows. And then not knowing is good. It makes everything potentially exciting. And I don't know if you want me to go into it or not, but it also leads to a very different view of decision-making. Because decision-making relies on our predicting. Should I do this? If I do this, these things are going to happen. Or should I do this? Well, these things are happening. Or this thing over here. But you have no idea. And so the whole venture of making decisions in the way most people go about it is foolhardy.
So what's the right way to make decisions?
Okay, I was hoping you would ask me that. All right, right now, many people are probably doing what they should do. However, they don't think they're doing it right. Okay, they believe that they should do cost-benefit analysis. So you take your options. What are the costs of this, the costs of this and here? What are the benefits? Add it up in some way to figure out what to do. But when you recognize that events are neither good nor bad, events are nothing until you frame them, the more mindful you are, the more ways you can understand it. To make that simple, every cost is a benefit, every benefit is a cost. You add them up, they're not going to tell you what to do. And there are many other components to this that I hopefully write about more clearly than I'm talking to you about it now in The Mindful Body. But essentially, I say, don't worry about making the right decision. Instead, make the decision right. So again, I take my students, I say, I want you to spend the week, don't make any decisions. Come up with some rule of thumb. You're always going to choose the first thing that comes to mind, or you'll flip a coin, or something like that. But don't make any decisions. And they go out, they come back the following week, and, so how was it? And it was stress-free. And I think most of our stress comes from thinking we should know things that we can't know. Now, when you know that things in themselves are neither good nor bad, but it depends on how you label them, understand them, frame them, that gives you a great deal of control over your life, right? That if you know that whatever happens, you'll be fine. If, let's say, in this middle of the interview, the camera stops, so what? It'll mean I'll get to eat dinner that much sooner. And you and I can just talk and get to know each other better. That would be an advantage. I don't know, whatever things happen, don't present problems. So it's fine if it's good, it's fine if it works as planned. If it doesn't, that's also fine. Something I write about is one of the things people should do when they're stressed is simply ask themselves, is it a tragedy or an inconvenience? Almost always it's just an inconvenience. Oh my God, I didn't meet the deadline. I burnt the roast. I missed the button. It doesn't matter. And when you ask, is it a tragedy? You say, no, it's really not such a big deal. Okay, but I'm saying more than it's not a big deal, even though that's a cute little one-liner to put on your refrigerator. Is it a tragedy or an inconvenience? Is that it actually is a good thing. There are good things about it. You say, my God, how can there be good things about everything? You're fired from your job. How could that be good? Well, just think about it, and especially the kinds of people who are going to be listening to us now, that, to be doing something, let's say 40 or more hours a week, if you're fired, that means you weren't appreciated. That means for 40 hours a week, you're feeling unappreciated, not good about yourself. Terrible. Who'd want to live like that? But it's very hard to make some of these changes. And now you're freed from that and can pursue something else. I threw too much at you, right?
No, one thing that came to mind is the difference between anxiety and stress. So when it's your decision and when the outcome is based on what decisions you make or your performance, for example, let's say you're playing in the NBA and either you're going to make the shot or not, and your career largely rests on your success.
No, not really. It very rarely will rest on one shot that you're making. But even if it did, implicitly is the assumption that if I'm not in the NBA, then I'm not going to be happy. And my life is going to turn, I'm going to become a failure. That doesn't follow. It could be the best thing that happened, because I would imagine that they're practicing. I don't know much about basketball. We'll have to ask our friend Philip. But that they're practicing a lot. They're on the road a lot. And that can be tiring and not good for relationships. All right? So now I missed the shot, according to you. I am no longer part of the NBA. Now I sit back and what do I want to do with my life? What things matter to me? I didn't ask that when I was 20 years old. And now I ask that and can choose to live a life that in the long run is more rewarding. And chances are, just between the two of us and whoever else is listening, they probably, in the year or two they were on the NBA, made enough money to be, to be able to support themselves while they're trying to figure out the next stage in their lives.
So your approach largely is starting by reframing.
Well, it's interesting because the more mindful you are, the less reframing you need to do. So when something happens to me, I don't see it as terrible, and then let me reframe it. I immediately just see the advantage in it. But yes, for most people who see the world as good things, bad things, stresses or good times, that when they're experiencing stress, yes, you should reframe it. Stress relies on two assumptions. One, that something is going to happen. We just said you can't predict. And two, that when it happens, it's going to be awful. So the first thing you should do is give yourself 5 reasons why it won't happen. 3 or 5 reasons why you're not going to lose that job, miss that shot, or whatever else we're talking about. And then you immediately feel less stressed because you thought it was definitely going to happen because you hadn't thought about it. Now maybe it will, maybe it won't. And then let's assume it does happen. This is the harder part. How is that actually a good thing? And there's always a way of understanding it. I talk about something in the book that happened to me many years ago. I was at a friend's house for dinner. It was well into the night. I get home, and all my neighbors are outside, and the fire engines, my place had gone up in smoke. That was a little scary. I didn't then say, oh, well, it doesn't matter. I don't have a place to stay. I'm, just like everybody else in that regard. And 80% of what I owned was now destroyed. All right, so, and it was interesting because I called the, I guess the insurance agent the next day, or whoever they told me to call, who came by and said it was the first time in his 25 years on the job where the damage was worse than the call. Most people, oh my God, and he gets it, so it's not so bad. But to me, I had already lost the stuff. To throw my sanity away with it didn't make much sense, but the story gets better. So I move into the Charles Hotel, and I was a sight because I had 2 little dogs, walking around. Okay, and it was around Christmas, and that meant all the presents that came in got burnt. All the ones that were going out to be sent were burnt. Anyway, so it's Christmas Eve. I go out with friends. I come back to the room, and it's full of gifts. Not from the owners of the hotel, not from management, but from the so-called little people, the chambermaids, the people who parked my car, the waiters and waitresses. It was beautiful. And I tell you, I don't remember, except for one thing that I lost in that fire, but every Christmas I have a renewed faith in people. So, all things told, it seemed totaled in some sense. It seems to me that it was actually a good thing. I'm not saying you should set your house on fire or, that it's normal when everything you've been taught all your life is as terrible. I'm not suggesting that it's easy or even advisable for your first reaction to be, oh, this is glorious. But the sooner you can think about it more mindfully, the better you're going to feel.
That seems completely true. But when it comes to decision making, you are trying to make one decision rather than another, and you're trying to make the better decision.
No, but there is no better. Better for whom, under what circumstances? I mean, I could have decided not to go out that evening. I didn't know, that the one possibility was going to be this fire, put it out earlier. And it would have seemed that would have been the right thing to do had I known in advance, but we can never know these things. But I'm telling you really honestly that I don't remember anything that I lost except my notes for a course I was going to teach in January. And I do remember the feeling that overcame me and does literally this time of year, every year. So I think that the decision was, yes, I should go out for that dinner.
Absolutely. I'm thinking of more obviously bad decision, good decisions, such as taking a very highly addictive substance that could ruin your life versus not, perhaps as a teenager. There seems to be a clear right answer. And
well,
a wrong
no, because for there to be a decision, it means there has to be uncertainty. And I think that the first taste of whatever that, or however you ingest that substance, is rarely a decision. Everybody's doing it, you do it. Or somebody you care, it's not a choice, should I or shouldn't I? Now, when it is a choice, should I or shouldn't I, then you do it a little differently. And I think that that hesitation probably prevents you from, or at least helps you from taking the substance the second time. there are very few things that people have access to where the one time, one shot means now you're hooked. So it's usually more gradual. And that if you are hesitant at time one, I think that will lead you often away from the substance. But even the substance, let's look, you have all of these very reputable people now studying psychedelics, which we were told back in the 60s, stay away from, they're deadly. And now they seem to be good medicine for many disorders. Um, so, um, clearly you can say to me, well, somebody wants to commit suicide, taking their own life. But again, we don't want to get into that sort of thing because those aren't the decisions that most people are making. But, we don't know, is there an afterlife and is it better than this life? And if this person's pain is unbearable, why should they have to endure it? So what is a bad decision? To get married, to get divorced? People, let me say this differently. Many people have regrets, and that's what I think you're reading from, that people are saying, I should have made the other decision. And regrets are mindless. Why are they mindless? For several reasons. Most important is that there's an assumption that the road taken, if you took the road not taken, but that would have been better. And there's no way of knowing. It could have been the same, it could have been worse. Not only that, but if you mindfully know why you're doing what you're doing, then you don't regret not doing something else.
So the key to leading a good life with no regrets is knowing yourself and knowing.
Yeah, is being mindful. Knowing that. Another thing this is very important to me, and it's again described in The Mindful Body, but I've also described it in previous books. It's going to seem so silly with all of his findings of people living longer, but this is the most important to me. Behavior makes sense from the perspective of the person who just did the behavior, or else they wouldn't do it. You don't wake up in the morning and you say, today I'm going to be obnoxious, cruel, judgmental, any of the things that when we point fingers at people. I'm going to take a drink or whatever the substance is because I want to become addicted. You don't do that. So when people are acting, there's a good reason for them doing that action. And this has major, major ramifications for relationships. So let's say you and I would be a strange marriage. I'm probably older than your mother, but nevertheless, okay. So you and I are an item, and I find that I'm having difficulty bearing you because you are so inconsistent. It drives me crazy. From your perspective, you're being flexible. You can't stand how gullible I am. But that's because from my perspective, I'm being trusting. Well, it turns out that each and every negative description, either one, for people's behavior has an equally strong but oppositely balanced alternative. For every negative, there's a positive that can describe the same thing. So you don't like me because I'm grim. That's because I'm being serious. I don't like you because you're stubborn. That's because you're stable. And when you recognize this, then you might want me to stop being so gullible. But now that you know that it's because I'm trusting, do you want me to stop being so trusting? And it's very easy. We keep trying to change people all the time by telling them not to be that negative thing. But people are not intending to be that negative thing. So, oh my God, you persuaded me. I don't want to be so gullible. I'm still going to end up gullible because I'm not being gullible. I'm being trusting. All right? You see? So we said to people, this is an old study, we give them 300 of these behavior descriptions. Circle those things about yourself. You keep trying to change and you fail. So I would circle, I'm impulsive, I'm gullible, okay? And then you turn the page over, and in a mixed up order of the positive versions of all of those words. So now we say, okay, circle those things you really value about yourself. I am spontaneous and I'm trusting. And as long as I value being spontaneous, there are times I'm going to seem impulsive. right? And so by being more mindful, you recognize that people's behavior may be explained in many different ways. And in doing what I've just said now, which is to ask yourself, what sense can that behavior make? You're no longer judgmental, and look at how nice we'll get along.
So based upon how you choose to look at the person is how you interpret
Yeah.
their qualities.
Well, that no, you don't have to hold the quality still, but sure, that if you give it some negative understanding, I mean, if I saw you, what did I say, is inconsistent, I'm not going to feel close to you. I'm not going to trust you, right? Because you say one thing, but you may change your mind the next minute.
Mm-hmm.
But once I see that you're flexible, which is the very same thing, but from a different perspective, then I embrace you.
How does mindfulness lead to self-knowledge or self-understanding? Because earlier um, you said that in order to lead a life without regrets, you should lead it. You should make
Well,
your decisions.
it's not reflective in after the fact. It's going forward. Why are you doing what you're doing? And if you know why you're doing what you're doing, then later you don't take yourself to task for having done it because you know why you did it. Let's say, for example, there's a party I'm invited to. Should I go? And I just don't want to go. All right. What I want to do, I really need to be by myself, baby myself, and just relax or veg out, however one wants to understand that. Okay. Now, if I say that to myself, and then the next day everybody was at that party and everybody's, oh, I missed the best party. No, I'm not going to feel bad because I know why I didn't go. But if I don't know why I didn't go, I just, decide not to go, and then I'm doing the same things. I'm watching television, some good series, whatever it is I'm doing, and the next day everybody says, "Oh, you missed the best party," then I feel bad. Okay. If you recognize that what you do makes sense when you do it, or else you wouldn't do it. Very simple, but for me, profound.
So, and that's a momentary thing that doesn't connect to some larger
It
self-knowledge.
can or not, but really moment to moment, again, if you're going to do something, show up for it. Yeah.
So, also, you mentioned a study about wound healing being um, going at the rate of perceived time
Mhm.
rather than real time. Um, how expansive do you think this effect could
I
be?
think it's enormous, but I can't cut off people's arms, in order to test it. But we are doing lots of things. So for one thing, when you have some disorder, let's say you break your arm, and you go to a doctor to have him set it and whatever, he's likely or she's likely to tell you, because you'll probably ask, how long do I have to be in this cast? How long will it take to heal? Now, the numbers that are given to you, the information that's given to you, tends to be higher or average. We're doing studies now where we're using the other end. Some people heal as quickly as um, um, 3 weeks. Now, you may or may not, but it's certainly possible. And I will say, that healing is in part a self-fulfilling prophecy.
So, is it because the authority figure tells you what to expect and that you adopt that expectation, or is there ways to modify your own expectations
Well,
independent?
no, if people are listening to me right now, and something happens and you ask the doctor, how long is it going to take me to heal? Then say, what's the quickest healing time you know of? And then know if, let's say, for argument's sake, the quickest healing time is a week, ask the doctor, well, does he think you can do it in 6 days? And he says, no, I don't know. Yeah, sure. What about 5 days? Oh, what about 4 days? Now, okay, 4 days, no. What about 4 days and 23 hours? What is the point where here you can, but here you can't? We don't know. And, I think that we need to ask a lot more questions of this sort and just assume again or recognize that the information we're given are probabilities, they're maybes, they're good guesses. No matter how they're stated as absolutes, we can't know. And so when we're on this topic, I think medical people are at least the students I teach who decide to go on to be physicians are some of the smartest and kindest people. But there's something maybe about medical education, I don't know, where they buy into things that I think is problematic. And I don't think that anyone has the right, in some sense, to tell someone they have a month to live. You cannot know that. And so a lot of those deaths, I think, in fact, are self-fulfilling prophecies. The doctor should say more often than is typically said, I don't know. I think maybe this, but I'm not sure.
One of the reasons why a lot of people feel compelled to go to doctors is to get a feeling of certainty, to avoid the stress of not knowing.
Exactly,
of
exactly. No, so it's a conundrum. I mean, for sure, but if I tell you X and X is less good than it might otherwise be, which would you rather hear? In other words, I can say to you, you have a year to live, when I can't possibly know that. Or I could say to you, I don't know how long you have to live. Maybe a year, maybe 20 years, who knows? Because if you're told the year, you're going to organize yourself for that year.
So if you had one suggestion to give to people about increasing their happiness, one suggestion about increasing their health, and one suggestion...
Yeah, it's all the same thing.
It's all the same.
Yeah, I would say wake up, and that everything you think you know could be wrong. Anything to make people exploit the power in uncertainty. Uncertainty is good. Uncertainty makes everything new. Uncertainty makes everything possible. And then, obviously from me, the suggestion would be to become more mindful, to recognize that there are always multiple answers to any question, many ways of doing anything that's being done, and don't settle into one. I do this in, lots of times when I'm lecturing on, let's say, sports, for instance. And I'll look in the audience, and I don't know why, but there's always a 6'5", somebody 6'5" or taller, big guy. And I ask him to come on the stage. I'm 5'3". And I say, okay, we just look funny together, right? And I'll ask him, put his hand up, and his hand is 3-4 inches larger than my hand. And then I just ask the question, should we do anything physical the same way? And I'd say, no, probably not. And so the more you differ from the person who created the rule to how you do things, the more important it is for you to mindfully deviate from that and do it your own way. So whenever we're taught anything, we should take those absolute instructions and make them conditional. You sort of hold the racket this way. Not this is the way you hold it, because if you have a small hand and how could you possibly hold any, tool? I mean, a hockey racket, a golf club, hockey racket, a hockey stick. Stick. Okay. But that's something that we should develop as a hockey racket. Anyway, so yeah, that people tell us, give us these absolutes. We mindlessly take them in as real. We become trapped by them. It never occurs to us to open them up and question them. And I'm saying take everything in conditionally. Could be. It would seem that, perhaps, probably, rather than is. And then life becomes more exciting. Right now, I think that too many people are sealed in unlived lives. And it's time, I think, to break the seal.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you join us next time as we examine and elucidate the frontiers of science and technology with the thinkers creating our future.